Yes, got it.
Hi, Javier. How are you?
Hi, Christy. I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining me today. As you know, we were talking about, we've been dealing with all kinds of insurance challenges with our buyers. So we wanted to just jump on a call and video interview and just kind of chat about what we're dealing with on my buyers and what you're dealing with on your end with the insurance market in California. So thought we would chat and just share some of our
Knowledge.
yes, knowledge and tips and tricks and insight and all the good things. Um, so Javier, you are with Acrisure Insurance, formerly known as Beach and O'Neill. We worked together for years and years and years.
Many years.
Huh?
Many years.
Yes, many years. And you always help me personally and so many of my buyers. And I always like to come to you for any insurance questions that I have. Um, whether
All the
it's
time.
getting in an accident or one of my clients getting canceled by their internet policy that they insisted on going with, and then they get canceled 30 days after closing on their house for whatever reason. So you've helped me so many times, and I just think that you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all of the things to do with homeowners insurance. So, and one of the things that I deal with, so clients kind of they don't always realize, okay, I need to get an insurance quote when I'm looking at a property. So that's one of the things that I am really adamant about when I'm doing a pre-approval. If my clients have a property in mind, we always like to take a look at the property, take a look at the location, the condition, and see if we're going to have any problems with insurance, or if in our area, Placer County, a lot of the homes are in high fire. So that's something that I always come to you about to see what we can do and see if that's going to change what my buyers get pre-approved for, if it's gonna put them out of their budget on their homeowner or on their monthly mortgage payment. So can you tell me a little bit about just what you're seeing on your side of things in the industry and the insurance market here in California?
So insurance reminds me of being in college. Like you gotta do research, right?
Right,
It's not just black and white anymore where some homes are, right? Where it's just you submit and it's easy peasy, you get a good rate. As you start going to the outskirts where like some of your clients are buying, I got to be cautious of like, hey, how does the roof look? Hey, how does the siding look? Just because insurance is hardcore these days, where insurance companies will issue a policy and, like you said, 30 days later will go cancel somebody.
right,
And it sucks to get somebody qualified on their loan based on a premium, and then a month later they get canceled and their rates are double. You
right,
know, so I tried to just underwrite my policy to the best that I possibly can based off the information available, right, through Redfin and Zillow. So that way, when I present a quote, I know it's pretty much going to stick.
right. Yeah, I mean, we've had one recently where there were siding issues, so it wasn't even just an issue of getting an insurance policy with like the California Fair Plan. It was high fire, so we were gonna need California Fair Plan, which is significantly more expensive than your standard homeowners insurance. So first I'm looking at that, and then we start looking at the pictures of the property and we see that there's siding issues and potential other issues with the home, the condition of the home itself, and talk to you and you look it up and you're like, we can't, we can't write on this if
I
someone.
mean, I can, but like it was going to put a lot of pressure on your client to be like, hey, you got to do X, Y, and Z in 30 days, or else they're going to cancel you. And now that rate that you thought you're going to have is no longer there.
Right, and in this case, I mean, that's a first time buyer. She is like 27 years old. Doing a low down payment program. She doesn't have a lot of extra money to get in there and do tens of thousands of dollars worth of work as soon as she closes on this home. So it's tough. You don't want to put them in this situation and say like, oh yeah, we can do like a, you know, the 30-day vacant policy, you have 30 days to do this work. And if you don't, then it gets canceled. And then on our end, if insurance gets canceled, loan servicers will force place insurance, and that's
Yeah.
gonna be significantly more expensive. So you're already dealing with a $300 or $400 a month California Fair Plan. And then on top of that, getting the force place insurance, you're in a really tough spot. And it's like, I don't want to do that to my buyers. Like, let's do this research and figure out a game plan.
Yeah, and sometimes like some of these listings, some of these homes, you only have one option for the wrap or the DIC, right? Because my other companies like Mercury, Bamboo, they're using Google Earth imagery, and they're looking at pictures somehow through like AI. I mean, that's my thought, right? They're
Right.
like blocking pictures. They're like, oh, per whatever image we pulled, this house is in bad condition, right? So if I only have one option for the wrap and then that gets canceled, then we're stuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I take my job very personal, so I don't like leaving people with no coverage. I get anxiety
100%.
about that.
Yeah, and it's that's the coverage thing is another issue, because we have clients that I always offer to get them a quote. I always tell them, like, I work with Javier, I trust him, he's taken care of many of my clients and me personally. Home, auto, all the things. And I tell them, it's your choice. Research it, get some quotes, but compare them. One might be a lot less expensive. But with anything else, it's like, it could be too good.
Like
to be
why? Yeah,
true.
but why?
Like, take a look, and you have always been so amazing about it. I have had clients that have done quotes through, some online company, and you've checked those coverages and you're like, okay, your coverages are good and that's a great deal, like, go for it. But for the most part, when I tell them, talk to Javier, send him the quote, he'll be honest with you. He will go over the coverages, and because even I can even look at them and go, these are not the same coverages.
You're right.
And I don't even know if it's enough to cover what we need covered for the load. It's not, and I know you mentioned, at one point we were talking about, you mentioned that sometimes the endorsements are incorrect and then the coverages are too low. And we want to make sure that we're covered, right? If you have an insurance claim, you need to have enough coverage to take care of it. So.
Well, I tell most people, everybody's a consumer, right?
Right.
So if you're a first time home buyer and you get my quote and my quote's $1,500, then you go somewhere else and get a quote and it's $1,200. But then you start asking, okay, the same, and it happens sometimes, right? With the same company, like I'm quoting some company and this company's quoting the same company,
Right.
exact same company, but they're like, why is it cheaper? And then I'm like, well, I'll tell you why. And I start giving scenarios like, hey, so what if like this happened in your house? Like, oh yeah, well, you don't have coverage for that policy. Or I give more scenarios. And then I'm like, yeah, so mine is better because I'm a homeowner myself. So I know what's important, right? But most people are consumers, so they look at the dollar amount. And I try to educate people. And then it's up to them, right? If they're like, okay, we want to go with you, or they'll take a gamble and say, no, we'll go with a cheaper policy, which happens sometimes,
Yeah.
But all I could do is just try to educate people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's all we can do, right?
Yeah.
There's so much information out there all the time that it's like, I just think that people get a little overloaded with it, so. Oftentimes when I'm talking to new buyers, they just have no idea about any of this stuff, so. It's really like specific to the person and the buyer and what property they're buying and what their needs are, so that's always. It's one of the biggest things that I take a look at up front. I'm like, we have to look at insurance. Like, we need to know what insurance is going to look like.
Yeah, because I mean, even places that you think are easy, like, oh, it's Lincoln, or it's Rockland, not a big deal. But if you're towards the sides of Rockland, like your backyard's open to the fields,
Right.
where you think it's not high fire, unfortunately now it can still be considered high fire.
Right.
So you might have to go with a more expensive policy because some of the companies aren't writing because they're like, oh no, it doesn't meet our underwriting guidelines.
Do you deal with the same type of thing in like coastal areas or areas that like have like flooding?
Well, flood. I mean, flood doesn't really flood. No, because a regular homeowner's policy doesn't cover flood, right?
Right.
So, but then some companies do have where they're like, oh, you're too close to the coastal line, so we're not writing. It's just hit or miss, you know. It's just me like trying to figure out the best company. Like I do so much insurance that I kind of know where to go to, right? Based
Right.
on the area, right? So if a home is like in Fort Bragg, I'm not going to go with Mercury because Mercury's probably not going to take it, you know.
Right.
But then I have Bamboo, then I have Home Site, you know. So I just start submitting, and I'm like, okay, cool. Here's one quote, and then I'll keep going, and then, you know, I have like a scratchy piece of paper, and I just write down stuff down, and I'm like 2, 3 quotes. I'm like, okay, this is the best one, you know,
Yeah.
and then I just send it over. But of course, each quote takes me 20, 25 minutes because I'm doing data entry, right? Due to like the insurance market, all the companies. So we used to have a rating system where we'd fill all out, you know, client's name, date of birth, address, their previous address, and fill out all the screens, and then would hit rate, and then all the companies would rate. Well, now all the companies pull themselves off the rater, so I literally got to go to every company and do a manual quote and hit rate. Or sometimes it'll give me a tentative quote, but it'll say, oh, please submit pictures of the roof, or please submit pictures of all 4 sides of the house because there's debris. And it could have been, like I said, it could have been like an old picture from Google that you know, from like overhead imagery that showed a bunch of trash or garbage on the property.
Yeah.
Insurance companies just want pictures. So I'm like, okay, cool. And if I'm confident I could get it approved, then I'll present that quote and say, hey, here's a quote. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get this thing approved, you know. But sometimes I'll keep that in the back of my on the side. Then I'll present a higher quote and say, hey, here's the best quote I have now, but I could say something else better, you know,
Right.
because approvals usually take 24 to 48 hours, depending on the carrier. And if it's better, I'm like, hey, by the way, I got this thing approved. Look it, and it's $300 cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to always be pretty quick. I know, what information do you normally ask the buyers for? Was that just
So now, you know, like a year ago, it was like, hey, give me your name and address, right?
right?
Not no more, right? They want to know, they, this is me thinking that they want to know if you're a real person, right? So
Right.
like when you do John Doe quotes, they're more likely to get declined than get approved, right?
Right.
So now I have like a little email, and clients call me. They're like, hey, I'm buying a house. I'm like, what's your email? Here's what I need. I need full name, your date of birth, the address you're buying, and whether you're buying the home as a primary home, secondary home, or investment. And then your current address. Your current address is really important now, because whether you're a renter, whether you don't own a property, you might have renter's insurance, or because a lot of people have renter's insurance and they're like, I'll do quotes. And I'm like, hey, well, you had 2 theft claims. Like, oh yeah, my renter's insurance, somebody broke into my car, you know? And so like, those are still 2 claims, right? It's still
Right.
kind of against you. So I try
Yeah.
to ask more details now, because I don't want to do a quote for somebody and it's cool. And then I go to finalize it and it pulls all the backend reports. And it's like, oh, they have all these claims now, you know?
Right.
So, and some systems won't let you pull that information until you have it all filled out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing. Full name, date of birth, current address, new address, and whether it's a investment property, secondary home, or primary home.
Yeah. And then, I know we've had some clients that have certain types of dogs.
Oh yeah, dogs. Yeah.
That, yeah, so depending on like if there are certain types of breeds, right, you have
I
to.
probably should start asking that from the get-go about dogs, because that question will come. Some companies will, because of the companies that we have now are kind of, I don't want to say slim pickings, but kind of, right?
Yeah.
Where I had companies before that would exclude animal liability. It'd be like, okay, yeah, this dog, we're just not going to add the animal liability, but the quote was still good. When most companies are like, you have this dog, we don't want to insure you no matter what, right? So I have 2 companies now that will exclude animal liability, but that's if they get approved, right, with those 2 companies as well, because they're doing the same thing. They're running Google Earth imagery, and you got to submit pictures
Yeah.
and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it's tough because I always come to you first because you always have the best rates, but there are a lot of clients that have had, like, they might have State Farm or Liberty Mutual on their car. Like, I have State Farm on my current home because of the area that I'm in. You know this because
Yeah.
we've had to redo that last year when the zoning changed for where I live. And not high fire, but it's like the state thinks I'm high fire and I'm not. So
Right, yeah.
I had to get in there, because none of the other carriers so you have my other policies, but none of the other carriers would keep me. So anyway,
Yeah.
State Farm, stopped writing in California, Liberty Mutual. Who are some of the other ones off the top of your head?
So USAA,
Yeah,
USAA, I think they're selective because
yeah,
they insure some areas and some areas they don't. So I think they're selective of where they
yeah,
want to write. And I think sometimes they'll quote through Bamboo as well.
right.
Because I've seen some of their quotes and I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah,
that's
the USAA one that I had was also putting through Bamboo. They didn't have enough coverages.
yeah, because
So,
I mean, I tell people all the time, if you want to talk to somebody in Colorado or somebody in the East
right.
Coast that doesn't understand California and all they're doing is pushing buttons and like, hey, here's a quote, then go that way, right? But I try to educate people and tell them like, hey, what's important, right?
Yeah, that's why I always tell clients to talk to you about it and go over it, because I just had that with a client of mine, the same one with the house that was needed a lot of work and we weren't gonna be able to get an insurance policy on it. And it's like the lender that they were working with before coming in contact with me, they were hounding them, like trying to get their business. And it's like, but after talking to the buyer, she's like, I'm so glad that we talked to you and did all of this, because we would have been in a really sticky situation. The other lender she was working with was out of the area. Mind you, I do loans out of the area too, but I just try to do my research as much as I can. And this
Yeah.
other lender wasn't they didn't know the area, it happens. But they didn't know the area. So it's like they gave them payment quotes. Didn't look into any of this stuff, put it down like $100 for insurance. Didn't know it was high fire, didn't look up the property, didn't know what the condition of the home was to see if it was even something that could be insured, let alone financed. So it's it's just one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah, I think if you're buying a home like in those areas, you should definitely have somebody local, because
Yeah,
it's come across my desk, right? Where a realtor refers me a client that's moving here from out of state, and
right,
then it's a California Fair Plan deal with the wrap, and
yeah,
then I send the invoice with the two insurances, and the processors call me like, "What is this?" I'm like, "It's a fire policy." Like, what do you mean? And I'm just like, "Oh my God, I have
yeah,
to educate somebody in Colorado, you
yeah,
know?" And it's just, I'm like, I think people, yeah, you should
yeah,
definitely use somebody local.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and too, I've had clients that they sign up with a company online that only does quotes online. And they sign it up and then they end up switching over with you. And um the online company is like, you can't talk to anybody. They're
No.
trying to call to cancel it. And my buyer just spent an hour, maybe 2 hours off and on throughout her workday trying to get a hold of them when it's like an 800 number. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it, yeah, it's like,
Well,
you,
yeah, sometimes that happens because of my desk too, where like a client is like, "Hey, I got a quote, but they said they issued my policy," and I'm like,
yeah,
well, who they bill?" Or like they say, "Oh, I paid for the policy already,"
oh,
and I'm like, "Wait, you paid for the policy out of pocket?" They're like, "Yes, yeah, it said I had to pay for it." I'm like,
yeah,
you don't even have like an effective date, a loan number, a mortgagee clause, like, you know, and
gets
that
paid
happens all
out
the time.
gets paid out of escrow. I always tell clients too,
Yeah.
you don't need to pay for anything. It's gonna be paid out of escrow. It's included in your closing costs. We're collecting for it. We'll take care of it. We'll make sure to pay the correct insurance
Right.
policy because we know which one you're going with.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's pretty, it can be frustrating. And maybe I'm old school that way, that I want to talk to somebody. I just,
I'm old school that way. Yeah.
I want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody or text them.
I
You know,
prefer talking. But
yeah,
then I have younger clients that are like, "Don't ever call me. I'll never answer. Don't text me, just email me." And I'm like, okay.
yeah. Well, at least there's more direct contact. I
Yeah.
just can't do the whole 800 number calling her. I did that this morning trying to pay for school for my daughter. I
Yeah.
I just want to talk to the cashier. I'm trying to give you money.
Right. No,
Pick
yeah,
up your phone.
I get it.
I know, it's crazy. Um, what else, is there anything else that you want to share with buyers or with, potential clients that might be helpful about?
I mean, when you get into, you just gotta know your area, right? You definitely want to get a quote
Yeah,
before you put an offer in something. Especially if you're buying up in the foothills, right? Auburn, Grass Valley, Forest Hill. Um, and do one quote at a time. I mean, my biggest thing is right that drove me kind of crazy is one time I had somebody send me like 6 different properties and they're all 6 California fair plans, and I'm like, can you just pick one?
yeah,
Because each one takes 30 minutes, right?
yeah.
Times 6, that's like 3 hours.
Well, yeah, and for the most part, it's probably gonna be, if the homes are similar in size,
Yeah,
price, and like location, they're probably gonna be like, they're gonna average out to be about the same, right?
right.
It would take, I mean, we're probably talking maybe a few $100s a year versus,
Yeah.
these policies are already $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year with California Fair Plan, depending on the property. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, because remember, the fair plan depends like if it's on public water or well, is it within 5 miles of a fire station?
yeah,
Like those things, right? And then some of these communities, like Lake of the Pines and Lake Wildwood, right?
mhm,
They're like in Firewise communities, so they give like a little discount, So it just depends. But I definitely get a quote before. I would get a quote before you actually go look at the house. If you plan on looking in the house, if it's a Wednesday and you can look at a house on Saturday, I would try to get a quote before you go look at it, because there's
yeah.
no sense if you going out there, fall in love with the house, and then you find out insurance is $6,000. And unless you could afford it, then it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in your budget, great, but
Yeah,
it's just better to be prepared.
yeah,
And, and make sure I mean, for me, I'm always checking to make sure that we can qualify you with that payment. I have a lot of clients that are like, oh, well, I want to live in like, Loomis or Penrith, Newcastle, I want property. And it's like, or up the hill, or okay, maybe I'll go to Forest Hill, Colfax area. I can get a little bit more for my money with, like, the homes are a little bit cheaper. Um. Then they're dealing with, they don't realize that the difference in the payment is significantly higher. You might be
yeah.
paying the same for a home up there with the higher fire insurance as you would for a more expensive home in, say, Rockland or
I
Rose.
always tell people that. Yep.
It's
I've
like,
had, I've had I've had clients 2 years ago, the Coldor fire. I had a client that was literally supposed to sign that day, and the fire was 1 mile from his house.
oh,
The house he was going to buy, and he
yeah,
called me. He's like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, me personally, I wouldn't want to buy a house that is going to potentially be burned down within 1 mile because that fire was going crazy, right?
yeah,
So, and he literally canceled his transaction at the signing table, and he bought a house in like Lincoln instead.
yeah,
Because once you go through a fire like that, that's scary stuff. I've had grown men, tough guys that are like, I'm moving. Like, no, like that was the scariest thing ever.
yeah,
When you're surrounded by fire.
it is scary. Yeah, I've had friends, that lost their home in the Paradise Fire.
Which means why insurance is so expensive. It's because we're opening fire season. It's just like there was a
Yeah,
grass fire in Tracy, you know.
well, and we get delayed if we have homes in a certain county where there's a fire and they're in process, or they're, still in escrow in the transaction. We haven't closed yet. If that appraisal's already been done and then a fire breaks out and there's like a natural, it's like a catastrophic, like natural disaster, we'll get emails that say like, hey, if you have homes in this, like an appraiser needs to go back out and verify that the home is still there, it's still in good condition. And then it wasn't affected by either the fire or smoke from the fire or
Right.
anything, and we have to get that re-verified, so that can delay closing. I mean, obviously you don't wanna buy a house if it just burned down,
No,
but,
you're paying 300 grand for ash.
but the lender needs to make sure that they that the home is still there and that
Right.
you know, their investment is
I
secure.
wonder what would happen if that ever happened.
No, they wouldn't close on it. Yeah, no, they wouldn't. I mean, it has to be in the same condition.
Got it.
I mean, I haven't had any but I have homes that I have had clients in areas where there was a fire nearby, and so had to have the appraiser go back out and just verify that it was still standing, it wasn't affected by it. And then once they do that and give us the okay to close, then we can close, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it burned down, yeah, I mean, because then it's like their collateral is basically gone. Their collateral for the whole entire loan.
Oh man. Yeah, summertime is my stressful time. I have an app on my phone that alerts me with fires. I'm like, can it just start raining again, please?
I know. It's like I get sick of the cold and the rain, but then you have fire season around here, so yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, well, thank you for hanging out with me today and chatting
Absolutely.
and suggesting that we do this. I haven't done one in a long time.
I like doing these. I've always been, I don't know, as time's gone by and I do these, like they're fun.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just nice to like get the information out there and, you know, share with people so that, you know, they can have more information to overload themselves with when they're looking for, you know, when they're looking into buying their first house.
Buying, yeah. I mean, or some of like, some of your past clients that ever need help with insurance, because everybody's seems like there's a bunch of companies that are non-renewing people. I have clients get referred to me that they're like, hey, well, I just bought my house and AAA is canceling me now, and because they flew a drone over my house. And like, yeah, like when you start flying drone, like that is a legit thing. They're flying drones over people's homes, and not just brand new purchases. If a client's been with a company for 20 years, they'll randomly do it too.
I
And
had a client recently, she's been in her house for a year or two now, but they got a non-renewal notice. I told her to call the insurance company.
yeah,
To find out, it was something to do with the electrical, maybe the electrical panel, I can't remember exactly. But a lot of my clients will reach out to me if anything happens with anything, insurance or like, you know, a roof or their pool, they'll call me and be like, what do I do? So I usually can't like fix that, but I'll tell them like, hey,
that brings up a good point. So a lot of companies now are being weird about these panels that are called Zinsco. It's like ZINSCO.
Yep.
Like all of a sudden they made it on a lot of companies' list now.
Yeah.
And they're like, I've had them, and luckily it's worked out where nobody knows, right? Like nobody knows what kind of panel it is.
Yeah.
And then they go out there and they're like, hey, we're going to cancel your policy in 45 days for this reason.
Yeah.
But like the clients already knew that they had to upgrade it. So they sent me like the letters from like SMUD and pictures, and the policies get reinstated, right?
Yeah.
And that's like literally the biggest thing now is those Zinsco panels, because they're getting older, right?
Yeah, that's been going, I've had that as of like even like 10 years ago. I don't know if there was some lawsuit on it a long time ago. I don't remember the exact what happened. I'm sure there was a lawsuit on it with them catching on fire. So I have had clients with them and the appraiser called it out. And we were able to have an electrician go out and do an inspection and change out some of the breakers.
Oh, awesome.
And do an inspection to get it updated. But yeah, I mean, I've had it come up. I don't know if it was the appraiser or an inspector that called it out initially, but normally we don't
nobody calls it out and nobody knows.
We don't normally see like the inspections, but so it was probably an appraiser. But
and it's not even a question on some companies don't ask, so they don't ask about what kind of panels you have. Some do, right?
Okay.
But some don't. But then all you know is 30 days later, you're like, oh, we're going to cancel your policy for these panels. But luckily the clients that I've always worked with are on it. They call an electrician and get the permits and then get it upgraded, and get it done.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to do a little bit of work.
Yes.
That's what I told her to do. I told her to contact her insurance company, but a lot of times my clients already have like an insurance company that they're working with, and if that insurance company is no longer writing in California, I'll say like, hey, then call Javier or we'll get you a quote and you guys can take a look at it and then you can chat with Javier. But, they, I said, just call your insurance company and say, hey, can I fix this? And then can you come out and re-inspect so that you'll renew me? Cause they had like 30 days.
Yeah,
It's something they could fix in 30 days, so.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll be checking in with her to see if that got taken care of. Cause I don't want her to be.
Because people
like, I
forget,
don't know.
people forget
Yeah.
and time. They're like, oh my God, my policy's canceling in 10 days. I'm like, yeah, it is.
No, they're pretty on top of it, so I'm sure she took care of it, but I was gonna just check in with her and make sure that she got it fixed.
Well, I'm always here to help.
I know, thank you. Awesome, well, it was good chatting with you, thank
You
you for
too.
hanging out with me a little bit today.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if anyone has any questions for Javier, when I post this video, I will include your contact information.
Awesome.
And for my 10 subscribers on YouTube.
Oh my
I'm
God.
kidding, I don't even know how many I have, but I'll throw it on Instagram too, so
Awesome.
there's a little bit more on there. But yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.
Alrighty, bye.
Bye.